So welcome everybody, I'm Chris Branscombe, CEO of Eastern Pennsylvania Youth Soccer. Thanks for coming tonight. I know we have people coming from all different directions, so I really appreciate that you came in person for this. It's kind of a special opportunity because we have our guest speakers, because they came all the way from Chicago to be with us today. I'll just start off by saying the most important thing is that parking will be free. Right, so I think we're going to split the gate.
The gate will be open when you leave.
So that was the most pressing question. Get that out of the way. Take care of you. So we have Rita Duval and Allison Corporis from U.S. Soccer. They oversee safe sport safeguarding for the entire country. So they service all of us state associations, all other members of the U.S. Soccer community, and helping to educate all of us on all these important topics. So what our goal is tonight is to really educate. So I'll let them talk and go through their presentation. We have a little bit that I'll go through on Pennsylvania stuff. But the goal is just to have an open conversation, ask as many questions as you want. We'll take this whole night as you bring it to us, right? We're not really constrained by anything. Ask all your questions, right? Give us your examples of what you want to clear up. Everything's open for discussion, and we want to make sure you go home with a better understanding of all of this. And everything will be provided to you later. So these slides, we'll have that available through the website. We're also filming this. So we're going to put this up on our website for all the other people that weren't able to come tonight. But just remember when you're asking any questions or you're talking about stuff to keep names and things out of it. Right? What's all those things you can say before crime shows? Protect the innocent. Okay. Do your best to keep that generic. But with that, before we start, I'll also introduce our staff. Megan Petrosky in the front row here. Many of you have dealt with Megan on a lot of registration issues in some of these. Leo Kelly, who's our Director of Operations, he's really overseeing this side of things as well, working directly with these two. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bria and Allison.
Thanks, Chris. Hey, everybody. It's nice to be here. Thanks for having us and for attending this in person. Do you think we need it? Oh,
well, it's one for the...
I'm so loud as it is. You probably don't need a microphone. But so like Chris said, we have a pretty full presentation, and there is a ton of content in the slides. So I first just want to let you know that we won't stand here and read all the slides because that's kind of boring. But we included a bunch of content because you'll get this presentation and you'll have that to look back on. We want to run through prevention. We're going to kind of tag team the content, but we want to run through some prevention strategies and our reporting requirements. It's great to be here and to meet you in person because we're a resource for anybody who's affiliated with U.S. Soccer. So our contact information is at the end. You can always reach out directly to us if you have any questions on safeguarding or any issues. And so with that, I'll get started. I think the agenda slide is first. Have to have a legal disclaimer. Our legal department makes us do it. Can't give you legal advice, and this is only for informational purposes, but like Chris said, we're hoping you'll ask questions and we can help you with issues that you're dealing with in your club. This is our agenda. I'm going to kick it back to Chris to go over some of the background check requirements that are specific to Pennsylvania. Then we're going to do a really quick update on the Safeguarding Clearance Program, which is a program that U.S. Soccer is putting together to try and improve safeguarding. We'll review our policies on safeguarding prevention, the reporting requirements, and then we hope to do a little scenario-based discussion where we'll give you guys a couple of scenarios and we can talk through what the reporting requirements might be or how you might handle those situations. Stop us. We're going to move fast, try and get everything in. You can stop either of us at any time to ask questions. We're happy to answer questions in the middle of the presentation, and we'll try to leave time for questions at the end too. All right.
I don't want to go through this too quickly and assume everybody knows everything, but I really do expect that you guys all are very clear and aware of all the Pennsylvania clearances, right? Just the basic things as you see there, the definitions, right? In our state's very different from a lot of others around the country. There's only, 4 states that have separate laws like us, right? So I think it's Florida, Massachusetts, and California's got a new law. So we're a little separate and distinct about our laws and our requirements are different from a lot of other people. So again, all of our clearances for anybody that works with children at all in this Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, you have to follow the clearances as prescribed by the state police, Department of Human Services. Okay. Yeah, the big line at the bottom, responsible for care, supervision, guidance, or control of children. That pretty much covers everybody in our world. And I know that's a question that will pop up for you from time to time at your club in terms of, who needs a clearance? They're only a manager. They only line the field, right? But we would like to say, in general, you fit under this definition in some way, shape, or form. And that if you're going to be working in and around children, it's the right thing to do to make sure you have all the clearances. But there's no reason you should skip it because you don't exactly fit this. It's going to be better for the kids, better for the safety of your community. So let's just all make sure that we do that. We have a clicker or
yeah,
an
I'll do it for Bria's part.
Okay. So we have 2 categories, volunteers and paid employees, right? Here's everything for volunteers, right? Basically, you need the state police criminal history, child abuse clearances, and the FBI fingerprints, so if you've not lived in the state for the last 10 years. Otherwise, you can do the disclosure form, which is also available. We have that on our website. All of this is also on their website, which we'll have it up later at keepkidssafe.pa.gov. So there is the out-of-state provisional requirement there. Again, I'm not going to go through it all. All this is on our website, again on the state website. Okay, but there is that provisional opportunity. But for the most part, if you're a volunteer and you're coming from out of state, see if they can get the clearances. Okay, or if they have their clearances in the state where they live. So, are there any questions about volunteers? Yeah.
2. So for IM reps that are like 14 years old, do they need clearances? Because they're going to be with kids, but they're not over 18?
Are they being paid?
Yes.
Anybody who's paid should have the clearances.
Okay. So we do
And
it.
the age is 14 and up,
Okay. And then
which is coming on the next slide.
concessions should have it as well for snack bars and stuff.
I'm always going to answer that as a yes.
Okay.
They may not be supervising the kids, but they're working directly with and serving the kids. So it's far better to be safe on that.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, so this kind of gets to the question. Employees, 14 years of age and older, right? Generally, coaches, administrators, and referees, there's other paid positions you may have, right? Whether you're paying someone to line your fields or mow your grass, we'll consider that as well. Same things, criminal history, child abuse clearances, and the FBI fingerprints. When you're a paid employee, you do the FBI fingerprints, right? The exception for minors, like that almost has never been brought up to us. I don't know if anybody's ever used it, but it is there. So if for any reason you think that there should be an exception for the minors, it exists. But at the end of the day, if somebody is paid to do any work in our world, they need to do the full 3 clearances. Any questions on that? Great. So I just want to throw this up there for some other exceptions for the J1 visa, right? I don't know how many might even have that case arise, but we just wanted to make sure you see it. The other question there, provisional hires, there's no such thing. You have to have the clearances before you set foot on the fields, period. Right? Out-of-state employees, again, required to have all their PA clearances. As a volunteer, you can use the clearances where you live, but if you're going to be paid, you have to have our clearances. Can you have additional standards? The answer is yes. By additional, we would mean more restrictive, right? If there's anything you want to add on, these clearances, but you may want to run your own background checks through another private company, where you have more strict requirements than the different offenses that are listed in the law. So, the next slide. These are all the restricted cases, right? So this is all the disqualifying crimes under the PA law. So when you get someone's background check, the criminal history back, it's going to tell you if they have any convictions with one of these things. So that's going to be your first test on whether the person is disqualified or not. I do want to bring up the one at the bottom because the drug abuse, that's a 5-year, right? So that drug abuse offense is only here for 5 years. The others, there is something in the law that after a 10-year period, you can make different decisions. You're entitled to do that. These are automatic disqualifiers inside of 10 years. So we still generally say to you guys, if you have a question about somebody, you get the final determination whether you want to hire them, whether they're paid or a volunteer, right? That's a paid or unpaid person. You make the final determination if they're going to let them work in your club. If you ever have questions about it, you can call and ask us. We can't tell you what to do, right? We're not going to be able to tell you legally that you should or could hire this person. In fact, that's one of the questions we'll even say in response. Do you want to hire this person? Because that's not up to us to determine. Right? We don't know why you might want to disqualify them or not. But we'll, in terms of trying to help walk you through these things, we'll help you do that much. So, any question on these? Okay, great. So I want to bring up just the scary part of this, the penalties. Right? It is in the law that there is a penalty in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for not having their clearances. So, again, it's a third-degree misdemeanor, may be punishable by imprisonment and a fine of up to $2,500. So that sounds pretty serious. So you don't want to do this. So we also have our own penalties, right? So we could fine you up to $1,000 and could suspend the person for up to a year. So we would penalize the club for their lack of compliance as well as the person for not being responsible for their clearances. Which, by the way, the person, the individual person, is responsible for having their own clearances. They can't really use that as an excuse, right? But the club, right, you have to make sure that they provide those for you. So, and I don't want to tread too far into this, but with travel players, yes, that stuff all goes into the God Sports system, so we can put people on rosters, but that's not your compliance vehicle necessarily. That's up to you at home on how you manage that. I think one of the other things well, here at the very bottom, the clearances are valid for 5 years, but they are due on the anniversary date. You don't get any grace periods. You expire today, you can't go on the field tomorrow until you have those new clearances. So I know that comes up a lot with coaches. They started the season, and then in the middle of the season, they expired, and, well, why is my name no longer, I have to clarify that with you. Does their name show up on a roster if they've expired? It does not. Right. Okay, but whether it does or doesn't, it's still your responsibility to make sure that your coaches and all your other people do have their clearances. Intramural people have to do this too. This is not just a travel thing. Everybody at all levels must do it. And at this point, this law came into effect in 2015, so we've been living with this for 10 years. It should be of no surprise to any adult that lives in Pennsylvania that they have to have clearances. And they have to do it whether they're working with us, or whether they're going to go to help out with the school bake sale, or get on the bus for a field trip, or volunteer at the church. Everybody in our state has to have these clearances if they're going to work in and around children. Again, that's one of the things that makes us a little bit different from other states in the country. So please be diligent with this. We really have to always pay attention to this and make sure that all of our coaches, administrators, volunteers, everybody knows that they have to have the clearances. And you can't give exceptions. You can't say, well, I'll let this go until you get it done. because then you'd actually be breaking the law, and we don't want that. So, it's just very important. We've said this for a number of years. It's a great time for us to reiterate this. We always do, but please make sure that everybody properly gets their clearances. If you ever have any questions, like I said, you just contact, really, start with Megan or Leo. If you get me, I can help too. But we want to make sure that we're doing what's right for all the kids. Any questions about the Pennsylvania clearances? Yeah.
If they're a volunteer and under 18, so like if it's a rec program and they aren't getting paid, or they're helping coach, do they need, and under the age of 18, do they need?
No, volunteers under 18 did not need it. Okay, but if they're paid, 14, 17, they do. Yeah.
For travel players 18 or over, they need to do, they don't, do they need to have clearances as well as the safe sport and the heads up?
The players, in terms of the Pennsylvania law, do not need clearance because they're not peer supervision or guidance control of the kids. But that question will come up later in a different way with safe sport. Anything else on Pennsylvania? Great. All right. Thanks. And I'll now do it back. Well, okay, this last slide. Just to make sure everybody understands, we showed this at our AGM for those that may have been there. Just to make it really clear, this whole ecosystem of compliance, safety, and safeguarding, it starts, right, the Congressional Act, the Safe Sport Act, right? This is a federal law. We, as soccer organizations, really, we are governed by the USOPC, who oversees the U.S. Center for Safe Sport, a federally created body, okay? U.S. Soccer is our national governing body. That's how we get our authority to run soccer here in Eastern Pennsylvania. So we are considered a local organized,
Local affiliated
Lo-
organization.
local affiliated organization.
That's the Centers for Safe Sports.
Correct.
Yeah.
You guys are considered similar because you come under our umbrella, and some of you are with clubs that work with other soccer organizations that are all in the U.S. soccer family. You're all held to the same standards and responsibilities. So, yeah, that's just giving you the big picture across the country. We all have to do this. Same thing if you're, judo, lacrosse, taekwondo, wrestling, we all come under the USOPC and these guidelines. So that's the big picture. Now I will turn it back over to Allison.
All right, I just want to give everybody a really quick update on our Safe Soccer Clearance Program and just the safeguarding department. We're trying to build out a bigger, more robust department at U.S. Soccer to support our members on safeguarding. I'm sure many of you read about the investigation that U.S. Soccer commissioned that Sally Yates performed to investigate allegations of misconduct in NWSL in the professional league. There were a bunch of recommendations that the Yates report made that we've been trying to implement. And so a couple of the things that are upcoming, in April, we're going to do a beta launch of our Safe Soccer Clearance Program, which is basically a program in our learning center that will be voluntary, that members can come and use for things like safe soccer or safe sport training and background checks. And so we're getting information about that out to our organization members like EPYSA, other state associations, and other organization members. And then in March, actually, hopefully next week, we finalized an informal resolution toolkit, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when we talk about reporting and trying to, and resolving these reports that you might get about a coach's misconduct or player's misconduct on the field. We put together a toolkit that is designed to help clubs and organization members come up with creative ways to address some of the lower level concerns, things that are still, not great behavior, but maybe don't warrant someone that, that someone's kicked out of the sport forever. Like lower level, and I know I am at the national level, and I know even down to the club level, you're inundated with those kinds of reports. And so look for that to come out in the next week or two. We're gonna socialize it in our membership newsletter, get it out to all of our organization members who can get it to you. And we're going to touch on some of our go over some of the pointers that are in that toolkit with you here tonight. So we have a policy 212-3. We wanted to just review this policy. Chris was talking about our governance structure. We are a federation of organization members. EPYSA is an organization member of U.S. Soccer. And so we kind of set policy and safeguarding requirements by pushing them down to our organization members at the state level, who in turn help their members at the club and league level. And so this is our policy. This is our safeguarding policy. 212-3 sets out our safeguarding requirements for all of our organization members. So all of our state associations, all the way up to our professional leagues, they all have to follow this policy. We thought it would be a good idea to just review with you, what our requirements for our members like EPYSA are, because they in turn will be asking their clubs and leagues to have these same policies implemented. So all of our members have to have a prohibited conduct policy. All of our members have to have a way to report misconduct. And I'm not going to read the slides, we'll go through kind of quickly because I want to make sure we cover everything, but also happy to answer any questions. All of our organization members have to have a prevention policy, and we're going to discuss what a prevention policy should look like, but basically the overarching rule of an abuse prevention policy is that you should not have any one-on-one interactions taking place between a single adult and a child that aren't open and observable. That's sort of like the set of policies we call the MAP, Rhea will cover. All of the specific policies relate to that one principle, and so at the club level, if you just remember that one thing, that there shouldn't be isolated interaction between a single adult and a single child, it goes a long way to sort of like removing the circumstances that can lead to abuse. So we'll cover that. There are exceptions, of course, like emergencies, or if the one child you're driving is your child. But as a general rule, that is what we expect in a prevention policy. And then all of our organization members have to have a way to resolve, address and resolve violations of the policy. As you know, I'm sure all of you know, we have a training requirement. That training requirement actually comes from the Center for Safe Sport. The center requires that every adult participant who has any regular contact with or authority over minor athletes complete safe sport training. And so I'm sure you're all really familiar with this requirement and love having to enforce it, but there is value in the training. It's currently 90 minutes long the first year you take it, and each year after it's 30 minutes. We have been promised by the center that they will reduce the core training from 90 minutes to possibly 45 minutes. So they've gotten a lot of feedback about the length of the training, so hopefully we can look forward to that. We require all of our members to offer parent training. You don't have to require it or track it, but you have to offer it, and training has to be offered to minor athletes. And just like the clearance laws in Pennsylvania, you have to have training before you have regular contact with a youth player or a youth participant. The other thing I'll point out, we actually tried to get the center to provide an exception, but if you're an employee or a board member of a club or of a U.S. Soccer member, you also have to take the training, even if you don't have any contact with kids. In fact, all of the board members and employees of our adult-only state associations have to take safe sport training. We worked really hard to try and get the center to restrict the training requirements to people that have contact with or authority over youth, but we lost that battle. So that's something to keep in mind. Background screening. So I won't spend too much time on this. U.S. Soccer actually, the only background screening requirement we have is that you have to check the sex offender registry in your state, our risk management list, which is available to our members like the PYSA, and the center's central disciplinary database. They have a list of people that are ineligible to participate anywhere in the Olympic movement. And it's great to check that list when you're hiring someone, because you don't want to hire someone that has been banned in another sport for, sexual misconduct or something like that. We don't require a criminal background check, but virtually all of our youth members have their own requirements. And like like EPYSA, some states have, some state associations have actual state law requirements for background checks. We don't have a background screening requirement for minor age participants, but there are some minor age people on the center's exclusion list, and so it makes sense to check if you can. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Bria to talk about the map. Does anybody have any questions on 212-3? That's really just to show you sort of like, how we're trying to kind of to push out safeguarding policies from the national level all the way down to the individual club level.
Specific question. So when do you expect that to get rolled out and then have to be enforced?
The toolkit?
The training?
Safe sport training is already required. Yeah, it's already required and has been. The toolkit for helping members figure out how to address some of these like lower level complaints about misconduct, hopefully we'll have published in the next couple of weeks.
So for the parent training and athlete training and stuff like that, what is the suggested sites or suggested materials that you cover? Because you're not giving them the full safe sport training that you as a board member or coach or administrator might have.
Yeah.
So what kinds of things are really kind of targeted within those trainings that you want to get across?
That's a great question, and I will make notes. You can offer, the Center for Safe Sport has parent training and minor athlete training. They're free. I think you have to create an account. It can be as simple as, when you're communicating to parents at the beginning of the season, just putting the link in there and saying, hey, if you want to take this, it's free. And and I can tell you, from taking both courses, parent training focuses on how to recognize, signs of abuse in your child, which is helpful. And also just, it helps, educate parents about what's an acceptable, what's acceptable coaching and what's not. We usually get reports from parents who are like, hey, my coach is, kicking my kid. Is that normal? Is that like a soccer thing? It's like, no, that's not a soccer thing. So just, how to see signs of abuse, where to report abuse, that kind of thing. Minor athlete training, same thing. Boundaries, there's bullying and hazing, education in there. Those courses are actually pretty decent, and again, you don't have to require your parents to take them, but you're supposed to be offering them once a year. And that can be, as in an email link or something like that. And they're available on the center's website if you do like Center for Safe Sport training. Any other questions?
Yeah, to add to what you said, this will be very challenging, like for us, the coaching certain area, because every parent to even drop or show up is very difficult, especially the one-on-one that you're talking about, one-on-one. For some of the kids, we have to like drop them or pick them up. You drop, at least you end up with one kid that's the last kid that's supposed to drop or supposed to pick. It's very tough. So if you try to sensitize maybe parents,
Yeah.
kids to participate or even show up to practice, even to game, it's like culture is different. Because I know I travel different countries, live in different countries and culture back home. So most of this course is very, very intriguing for that culture. Because what you take as abuse, other culture is not abuse.
No, I understand where you're coming from.
Mostly stuff now that may be disadvantage for the kids.
The one-on-one rules, look, there are definitely challenges. In your driving scenario, it would be just that last kid that shouldn't be alone in a car with a coach. It's actually as much for the coach's protection as it is for the kid's protection, but, carpooling can be a workaround. You can drive a group of kids. You just have to be really careful. The rules technically don't allow you to be one-on-one in a car. The other thing is you can have one-on-one interactions with kids as long as it's an open door meeting, or you can talk to a player one-on-one on a field. Or open and interruptible doesn't mean that somebody has to be able to hear what you're saying. You just have to be seen so that, you just have to be out in the open, not behind closed doors with just one kid and one adult. Because unfortunately, for people that want to abuse, that's how it starts, by isolating the child where other people can't see. And so those are the center's rules, and I actually think there's a lot of value in the policy, but they are sometimes very difficult to enforce. It takes extra work and extra effort. But I think it's worth it, it's worthwhile. I'm gonna pass it over to Rhea for the map.
So obviously we've already touched on a little bit just about what the map is and what it's intended to do. It stands for the Minor Active Abuse Prevention Policies, for those of you who may not have known that. And again, just trying to limit that one-on-one interaction between adults and children, and making sure that any of that contact is observable and interruptible. So there's these different policies kind of broken down within the map, so just gonna run through these quickly. For meetings, obviously, another adult needs to be present, requiring parent consent if there is a one-on-one meeting between a child and a mental health professional. Locker rooms, obviously no recording devices, they should be monitored. Adults should not be getting undressed in the locker rooms with minors. Athletic training should only be performed by a licensed professional, not a coach. A second adult should always be present and requires parent consent. So pretty straightforward for those.
Athletic training, you mean medical training?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when we say athletic training, it could be one-on-one training with a coach, training a player on certain
Right.
things. So you mean medical.
Right. Correct.
Yeah, the center calls it athletic training modalities, but what they're talking about is like physio. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a question. With our, it's not with our youth side, but it's with our USLW team. We have players that are 25. We have players that are 17. How does that go in with adults should not be undressed in locker room with other minors? Because what other space do we give? Like if we're in North Carolina and not given another space, what do we do? You know how that works?
So there is, we will get to some of the exceptions.
Okay.
The biggest exception that's helpful here, your 1725 example, wouldn't work, but there's a 4-year close in age exception.
Right.
And so none of the one-on-one policies apply if the adult and the minor are within 4 years of each other and one doesn't have authority or control over the other. So if you have a 20-year-old coach and a 17-year-old player, you've got like what we call power imbalance. That's different.
Right.
1725 is too big a gap. And so, I mean, ideally you could, you could have that player change, at least offer that player a stall, or just, try and respect that player's privacy
Right.
if at all possible, or offer some other option. I mean, luckily, we don't have the locker room situation as much as other sports do. Like, we're not swimming. A lot of these rules, they're Olympic movement wide, and so some of them, it's like, there's a rule about showering, and it's like, we don't do that in our sport like swimming does. So there's some things that are lost in translation, but just creative ways to try and offer a private place to change if you can. Or offer the player, if you're staying in a hotel, if everybody's changing in the locker room, if you have a young player that's not close in age, offer that player can get dressed in their room if they want. But the close in age exception helps with a lot of those.
Right.
Because usually you're not gonna have that big of a gap, although you might sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, and Rhea will cover the exceptions. And all these rules, by the way, are if these interactions are not observable and open. So this is all, if it's happening behind closed doors, here's what has to happen.
Right.
Oops. Oh. Awesome slideshow.
Yeah, next one. There you go. All right, talking about transportation and lodging. So I know we talked a little bit about cars earlier, but again, no one-on-one transportation. There needs to be either a second adult or another minor present in the vehicle. And then also, unless parent consent is obtained, and then again, an adult and a minor should not be sharing a hotel room together. Electronic communications, all electronic communication between adults and minors have to be open, transparent, professional in nature. We like to call it, we like to call it soccer hours, so make sure you're only, reaching out to players and whatnot during soccer hours, so not like super late at night, just kind of during normal, like your business hours. Any electronic communication to a minor or group of minors should copy another adult, so if someone reaches out to you directly, when you respond, you do need to copy another adult on your response. No instant messaging or Snapchat, and just not, connected with any minors on social media platforms.
Any questions about electronic communications? Again, we get a lot of like, what do you mean I can't, text my player, if a player reaches out to me. But again, that one-on-one conversation where there's no other adult that can see what's going on, you can just simply say, listen, the rules say I need to copy another adult, so I'm gonna copy coach, my assistant coach on this, or I'm gonna copy your mom on this. It's just good practice. Obviously there are exceptions, emergency and things like that, but it goes a long way to, again, preventing those situations where conversations get less professional, they go into the night, and then there's potential for abuse there. And driving can be challenging too. I know sometimes if you have, if you're carpooling, like, I know people who, like, if there are siblings, they'll drop off the siblings last because there are two of them, so they don't end up with just one kid in the car. You kind of have to get creative, but it's all for a really good cause.
Good question. Some of that is quite kind of subjective. So if we had a situation where we weren't sure whether that communication was appropriate or it was strange, there was something weird about it, we wanted to discipline a coach under those circumstances, would we be able to do that just based on our subjectivity, or would we need to find some definition somewhere of it?
Well, the nice thing about the math, this policy, is that, if you have a rule that says a coach can never have a one-on-one text conversation with a kid, you can just discipline the coach for breaking that rule, and you're not saying that he's an abuser or she's an abuser, but you can say, listen, and like consequences for texting a kid without copying another adult might be minor. It might be, we're going to warn you, don't do this again, you have to copy a second adult. But it really does go a long way, in keeping, if that happens a couple times or a few times, then you might start to worry, right? But maybe the first time it's a warning. But it's nice to have the policy and just be able to say, look, I'm not making any judgment about whether, because the coach is going to say, what the heck, I was just texting the field change, or I was just texting the practice time. And you can just say, you can't have any one-on-one conversation. We're not saying that you had any sort of like terrible motive or anything, but this is for your protection, coach. It's for the kid's protection. Next time, just copy another adult, and then, take it from there. So it takes away having to judge. It takes away having to try and figure out why it was happening. It's just not allowed, period.
The way that we do it at our club is we use TeamSnap.
That's great.
So TeamSnap is readily available to everybody. You can see the chains.
Yep.
And it takes away that negative one-on-one cell phone use.
Yep. That's great. Any other questions?
But are they only using the group chat, or because you can individually chat individual members within TeamSnap too, and then you've got the same kind of situation, because not everybody can see that.
Within our club, we have a club level TeamSnap.
Yeah.
So our club administrators
Limits it.
can absolutely see every
Okay.
communication. So it gets CC'd to the coach. So we set the defaults that way. So it makes
I know
it,
there's a lot of clubs too, that just individual teams have them, and not the
Right.
whole entire club, so, okay.
I also think that you can hold these policies into your contracts with coaches and into your employment guides for people who come on as, let's say, full-time or part-time employees or consultants. And then have them put their initials next to specific policies like this.
And we have some links at the end. We have model policies on our website that are, like, for lack of a better word, generic, but, that meet all the requirements that you can adopt for yourselves if you need them. And so we'll make sure we cover that.
So again, we've touched a little bit on the exceptions to the map, just to go over those a little bit more. Obviously, there's certain situations where if there's an emergency, sometimes there's gonna have to be that one-on-one interaction. Close in age exception, so what Allison mentioned earlier, when there is, when someone is no more than 4 years older than the minor, these do not apply, or that's an exception. The dual role exception, when an adult has a dual role relationship with a minor, and there's obviously been consent from the minor's parent or guardian. And then personal care exception, so if, an athlete needs assistance with, day-to-day functions of life, they can, assist them in that way. So those are the exceptions to the map. Does anyone have questions about those? All right, so we wanted to cover a little bit about reporting. So your reporting requirements. Starting out, we have reporting to law enforcement. So when you're made aware of an allegation of child abuse, that needs to be reported to law enforcement. So calling local law enforcement where an incident occurred at the field in the the jurisdiction where the incident occurred. This could also be reporting to DCFS. Making sure that you're making those reports within 24 hours of you becoming aware of the allegation. Additionally, so you need to report to the Center for Safe Sport. These reports also have to be made within 24 hours of you becoming aware of the allegation. And that includes child abuse, sexual misconduct. Under sexual misconduct, that includes the power imbalance and sexual harassment, regardless of the age of the party involved. So what we mean by that is that it doesn't just have to be sexual misconduct between adults and minors. If it's anything between 2 adults or 2 minors, all instances have to be reported to the center. And then any sort of retaliation or abusive process related to the center's process has to be reported to them. And then just to your member or club, any other prohibited conduct violations as defined by U.S. Soccer or EPYSA's policy. So this could include map violations, what we just went over, emotional misconduct, verbal abuse, bullying, physical misconduct, that's not child abuse. All of those things would just have to go to your club, league, or EPYSA. Any questions about reporting, just kind of what I just went over on that slide? Yeah.
We actually have our own separate email listed on our website. That it's safesport@eaglefc.com. That way they can, if someone has a complaint, they can actually type it into there and we'll follow up that way. And it's monitored every day.
That's great. And yeah, we'll go over in a minute some of the different, ways and places that you can report, but obviously that's great. I also like to encourage people, if you are made aware of an allegation of child abuse or sexual misconduct, in addition to reporting it to the center, let EPYSA know about it. When we get at U.S. Soccer's level an information request from the center when a report is filed with them, and they don't let us know what the allegations in the report are. So there could be some, horrible sexual abuse case that neither U.S. Soccer or EPYSA know about. And in order to take temporary measures against the coach, EPYSA has to do that before the center accepts jurisdiction over the report. And so just being as, open and transparent with EPYSA as possible will help, keep the sport safer in the end. So I always like to encourage people to do that in addition to reporting to the center. Yeah.
So the reporting part, so how do you pick? So are you talking about somebody reporting something they saw, or are you talking about the organization reporting this?
Yeah, so obviously if whoever sees the incident, should be making a report. But if you become aware of an allegation and you're not sure if it's been reported, then you are required to make that report, if that makes sense. So like say, a child is physically abused by a coach at a soccer match, and we don't know if local law enforcement was called, and someone just tells you about this incident. If you're not able to confirm whether or not it was reported to law enforcement, then you would in turn have to make that report.
So that is going to be a challenge today, is people use the information exchange. So somebody who's angry or aggravated with somebody like a coach and reports something that never happened, right? It's made a report. Is there no follow-up process first before it's reported out to everyone else?
Follow-up process, like with the Center for Safe Sport?
Yeah, I mean, you just can't take a person's word that, hey, I saw Johnny Jones, you know, harassing the player, right? And nobody saw it then. So I'm just trying to figure out how the coaches and instructors are also not sucked into whatever the parents anger, and sometimes this happens, where you have parents just got upset and start saying stuff. How do we manage that?
It doesn't matter.
When in doubt, report it.
Well, I agree with
It
that.
doesn't matter.
No, I agree with that.
It has to get reported.
No, I agree with that.
No, I think I can also help with that. In Pennsylvania, anyone who is in a supervisory role over children, which would be anybody on the field, is designated by law as a mandated reporter. The reporter doesn't have a choice. They must call Childline, which is the Pennsylvania state clearance level. That creates an investigation. So the way that you avoid the issue is if someone calls Childline, then it gets investigated either by the state police or the local police, depending on who it is. We're talking about child abuse in particular right now. So both Safe Sport, U.S. Soccer, or EPUSA, but the Commonwealth requires it immediately. So the failure to follow that mandated reporting act and Childline can get people who did know to have criminal charges brought against them.
And you Pennsylvanians are lucky because the Safe Sport Act actually creates a legal obligation. We're all mandatory reporters because we participate in the Olympic movement. And the law is really clear that an allegation is what triggers the reporting obligation. And that's intentional. The burden should not be on you to try and figure out whether something happened or whether it didn't. And remember, we're only talking about child abuse and sexual misconduct. So other things can be reported to your club or to EPUSA, but the mandatory reporter obligation is triggered by any allegation of child abuse or sexual misconduct, and it's designed on purpose so that it isn't your burden to try and figure out who's summed you. And if someone gets upset with you for reporting, you can also say, I have no discretion here. I don't know whether this happened or not, but once I hear that, I have to report it under law. It's my responsibility, got no choice. And I can say we had almost 1,000 cases at U.S. Soccer last year. I don't think I've ever seen a falsified sexual misconduct report against a coach. I've seen stuff where the timing is interesting, where people wait until, they don't want to play for that coach anymore, and then they report it. But if it happened, right? So I don't think, there's too much risk of just like a fake report or a false report. Either way, though, the process will bear that out. I'm confident. But it really is, and this is all from the Larry Nassar gymnastics scandal, where we had parents who thought other parents had reported it. We thought parents saw other parents, it must be okay because no one's reported it. And so now just everybody's a mandatory reporter. And we've taken like all the guesswork out of it. But it can feel uncomfortable. It is weird to think like, I feel irresponsible doing this because I don't know if this really happened. It's just not the way the law works.
And in Pennsylvania, if you make the call and you mandatory report, you're immune from prosecution or from retaliation by the person. You've done the legal obligation. If you look up on any Google search, Pennsylvania mandated reporters, Childline, they have all the Q&As there for you to follow and how to make the call and what you have to do.
Any other questions before we move on from reporting? We're going to hopefully have time to talk about a couple of scenarios that might help us understand just like what we do with some of these situations. So I'll keep going, but feel free to interrupt.
All right, so kind of like I mentioned, two different places that you can report. So reporting directly to the Central Spaceport. This is a hotline that they have. You can call. They also have an online form, so you can include party information, attach, if it's like a referee abuse assault, you can attach like a referee report. And then also reporting to U.S. Soccer, so we also have a hotline you can call and an online form. Both of those generate reports to myself and Allison, and then we can kind of refer and assist from there. A note we wanted to make here, remember that reporting allegations that fall within obviously your mandatory reporting obligations, so child abuse, sexual misconduct. Just reporting to U.S. Soccer does not fulfill that mandatory reporting obligation. So in addition to reporting to U.S. Soccer or EQISA, you would need to report to the Center for State Sport to fulfill that. All right, so I think we want to get into a little bit of this reporting kind of scenario. So we have 3 different scenarios for you all. We're going to put them up on the slide, read them off. Spend a couple minutes discussing with the people around you. Just if this came across, your desk, what would you do? Where would you report it? How might you resolve it? And then we'll kind of come back as a group and share out answers.
And I'm sensitive about time, so we can do like 2 minutes a scenario and still probably be respectful of everyone's time. I don't think we've ever done one of these that actually like didn't go longer than it was supposed to, because I love that everyone has questions. But these aren't designed to like catch anybody out or anything like that. But these are we sometimes see trends in the types of reports we get. So these are just designed to kind of make you think about what would I do if I got one of these. So we'll put the first one up, and maybe we'll do like unless someone I'll give you a minute to read it, and then maybe someone would like to give an answer about what they would do if they got this in their club. Anybody have any ideas? It's a tricky one because it's all adults, but we just covered it in the reporting obligations.
I don't think that it falls into maybe a sexual misconduct, like, I don't know what word I want to use. They're being persistently asked out, but I don't think that it crosses a major line.
So I think you're hitting the question, you're like asking exactly the right question, which is, so this is designed to get to the fact that sexual harassment is sexual misconduct under the code, and that would need a report to the center, but you would have to decide, is this sexual harassment? Is it persistent? Is it pervasive? So like, we could debate about that all night, right?
That's what questions you would have to ask, like, is it just, will you go out, will you go out, will you go out? Or is it pictures and will you go out?
So if this was persistent and she's coming to you and saying, like, this guy will not stop asking us, and I've told him no 100 times, I would probably report that because it's probably sexual harassment or could be. You don't have to report to law enforcement because there aren't any children involved. But we talk to a lot of members who forget that, there doesn't always have to, one of the involved parties doesn't have to be a child to trigger the mandatory reporter obligations when it comes to sexual misconduct. Also, you might have employment policies, and one or both of the people who are employees, you might have like an employee manual, and that's a good time to mention that despite these reporting obligations, your club can always take whatever employment action it deems necessary in these situations. You can do an employment investigation, you can take employment action. That's separate from the center's process and mandatory reporter requirements, so you should never feel limited by any of these rules when it comes to dealing with this on an employee level if the person's an employee of your organization.
So is that one classed as harassment because there's a power thing, because one's an assistant coach and the other's a coach? Or does that not matter?
It does matter, it does matter, and I think the factors would be, does the person that's bothering, the assistant coach have authority over her? Can he get her fired? Can he, and then also just how, if someone asks somebody out one time and the person says no and they're like, okay, that's not sexual harassment. It can't be, it's not a one-time thing unless it's like an assault or someone's grabbing somebody or something like that. But if it's comments, the test is like, is it pervasive? Severe or pervasive. So asking somebody out once a week who said no 100 times might be pervasive. It might create what we would call a hostile environment. We usually tell people to err on the side of reporting if they're not sure. But this one, these are supposed to be kind of like in the gray area because it makes for better discussion. There aren't any like clear-cut right answers. If I got this, I would probably report it.
A good way to look at some of these in this kind of an area is the first question you should ask is, what is the relationship between these partners? If there's a head coach and an assistant coach, then it's a relationship of management to employee or boss to employee, and that right away should tell you that if the boss is continually asking the employee out, that's a problem. These aren't two 20-year-old kids, young people, who are equal in stature, equal at your club. So the fact that you have a power dynamic, assuming the guy is harassing the woman, this is the way it was worked out, I didn't quite say that. You may have other power dynamics going on. This is harassment, abuse, or stalking, any way you want to claim it, that's going to be something you have to report to safety board. You don't necessarily have to report it to child line because we're assuming the assistant coach is over 18.
Yeah, they're intended to be adults. Any other questions about one before we talk about scenario 2? You guys might be more familiar with this situation since you're getting a lot of these. Yes. Any ideas?
That absolutely, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
Can I ask a extended question on that? What
Yeah.
about a spectator?
You would still report it. The catch there is, so I don't know, Maria, do you want to talk about what the center does with these cases and how they're defined?
Sure. So, yeah, obviously what we're getting at here, physical misconduct against a minor has to be reported to law enforcement and the Center for State Sport. They become a little bit confusing on the Center for State Sport reporting side because this sort of situation, child abuse, falls within what they refer to as their discretionary authority. So they have exclusive jurisdiction over cases, and then they have discretionary jurisdiction. Pretty much what we're seeing at U.S. Soccer's level is they're only taking jurisdiction over what falls in their exclusive authority, which is sexual misconduct. So a report like this would be declined by the center and referred back to U.S. Soccer, and then obviously we refer it back to UISA. So it can get confusing. Obviously, we understand because you have to report this to the center, but they're not going to take jurisdiction and investigate it. So I know that can be
But the pro, would
Annoying.
there be a record of it?
What was that? Yes. You made your mandatory report.
Can I add to that? That is clearly referee assault.
Yeah.
Okay, so that report has to come to us. Okay, so the referee has to put that report in. That would go to us. And because it's a minor, the penalties are far stiffer than if it was adult to adult. So something would definitely happen in this case from us. But as Bree was saying, it's going to get kicked back regardless because of these issues. But there is definitely a way that this.
It's also in Pennsylvania a specific criminal offense. can't assault a referee, no matter how old they are, in any sporting event, and there's specific criminal statutes which cover that exactly. So that person, fan, spectator, or coach, could end up in some serious trouble.
And so and the reason we use this example is to remind everybody that if the referee's a minor, you have your mandatory report obligations. Try not to get too confused or annoyed when you're like, okay, I reported this, and then it comes right back with decline, which doesn't mean that the center doesn't think it's a bad or doesn't think it happened. It's a jurisdictional thing. They all come back, but you have to report it. And then finally, all is not lost because, like Chris said, we have our referee abuse and assault policy. So the decline just means that it's going to be handled by UPYSA instead of the center.
And about 1/3 of our referees are minors.
Right. We're seeing a lot of these. Okay, this is the hardest one.
Yeah, about calling on the local authorities. I mean, are you just calling and telling them what happened, or do they need to like come out to the field, or you know what I mean? It's just like, hey, this happened. Can you make a report, or do they need to?
So it depends on when you make, like if you happen to be there, or if there's a mandatory reporter that happens to be there, they can call police in the moment when they see it happen and get them to come out. But if you're reviewing a match report and you see it documented there, what you're trying to do, and listen, it's an uphill battle sometimes, and it's not because law enforcement doesn't care. They're sometimes unfamiliar with our mandatory reporter obligations as sports people. And if no one's in imminent danger, it's sometimes hard to get traction. But the goal is talk to somebody, get a badge number or a report number, explain that you're a mandatory reporter, and explain why you're reporting, what you're reading on the match report. And there is sometimes follow-up by law enforcement, especially, if there's a specific law in Pennsylvania that covers this. Yeah, you're supposed to report to law enforcement within 24 hours of when you receive the allegation. So if that's 3 days later when you happen to see the match report, so be it. You just do it as soon as you hear about it. This is the last one, and I think it's the hardest one. And this is one where I really don't think there's maybe one clear-cut answer, but we can have like a quick 5-minute debate and get you guys out on time. And I'd be willing to bet that everyone in the room has probably gotten a complaint like this at one time or another. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it does, because the language really matters. The coach is supposed to be like emotionally intelligent, so it definitely cross the line, and it's not up to, I think it needs another level just so you can hold the coach accountable.
That's a good answer. So you could debate about whether this constitutes child abuse under the law. You might, if it really was just, one time, it might not constitute legal child abuse where you have to call the police or you have to report to the center. But we all recognize it as, at best poor coaching and at worst, a form of emotional abuse or verbal abuse or emotional misconduct. So these are the types of situations that we're hoping our soon-to-be published toolkit will help solve, because not every one of these needs to result in a disciplinary hearing and a suspension. And so we put up here like some potential solutions to a situation like this. The scenario intentionally says that this coach you've never had a complaint about this coach before, and so he's not a repeat offender, but you still want to address it. And so these are just some ideas for doing that. And you might also have your own ideas.
Yeah, I think it also ties into what this guy was saying with the culture thing. Not because it's like normal, that means it's right, so the buck has to stop somewhere.
That's right. I mean, when we see these reports, there are certain red flags that I think, and feel free to jump in with others, but when I see reports, if there are personal insults or like excessive profanity, those are things that just aren't appropriate. In sport, I heard someone recently say, like, if your teacher couldn't talk to your child that way, then your coach shouldn't be able to talk to your child that way. It's the very same thing.
So the question comes in is if the cursing was not in there, right? Last weekend, I witnessed a coach say to a player, you're not carrying your weight. I don't know where you must have been up late last night. If you're not going to play, I have to sit you.
Yep.
Right? That seems like a very normal conversation. There's no profanity. You're hurting the team by not playing the right way.
Yep.
So to me, is if they take the profanity out of that, is it a reportable offense?
So I don't know what you all mean so I think that that makes, no profanity makes it much more acceptable, right? There are a million factors. Is he 1 inch from the kid's face? Is he screaming at him? You know, but no, you could absolutely, if you're raising your voice because the kid's across the field, you know, and it may be like he's not going to play because he's not pulling his weight. This is all incredibly debatable. So the way that we present it is like, what kinds of things aggravate the situation, right? Maybe that's not reportable. You might get a report about it though, and you will, right? Like we got a report once from a mom who was upset that another mom posted a video of her daughter being megged, like in slow motion on, you know, Facebook or something. It's like, okay, that's really lousy, like I would never do that, right? But is that, you know, what is that? So these are difficult questions. I think your scenario, you're right. So right, and then like reasonable minds can differ on these things, right? So profanity, and so listen, there are people who would say profanity is totally fine. I have no problem with profanity. It's one factor, right? Any kind of like personal, any kind of like criticism or personal insult to like someone's appearance, especially a kid. I don't like comments about, you know, comments made by coaches to boys about their masculinity or lack of masculinity, name calling, like those are all things that have no place in sport. And that hasn't always been the case, but I think you gotta kind of take a hard line. And like we said, it doesn't mean that that guy can never coach again, but you gotta figure out how to change that behavior. That's kind of what we're hoping to achieve here.
Yeah, and I think when we say like making a report, obviously it doesn't have to be like send them to US Soccer's, you know, online form or hotline and they have to make a report there. Like someone was mentioning earlier, they just have like an email address and someone can just plop something into their work. It's just be going straight to the club director or league and just saying, hey, I saw this, or it doesn't have to be like a whole formal process. And like we haven't mentioned here, just because someone does, you know, bring these sort of allegations to you, it doesn't mean that they get a full-on investigation into like what happened or the whole situation. We get reports all the time when parents were like, I want this investigated, I want this outcome, and it's like, okay, that's not how it works. Just because you made a report and, you know, brought us these allegations doesn't mean you're entitled to any sort of investigation and whatnot. Follow up and, you know, the authority of how reports are resolved is entirely up to our member organizations. And if that is, you know, having you at the club or the league level, you know, address those, then that's up to them. And however you know, come to that conclusion is, you know, totally within your authority. So obviously just kind of want to mention that as well.
That's a very good point. We get a lot of calls from parents who are dissatisfied with the outcome of, you know, the report that they made. But our policies just require our members to not to ignore these issues and to follow up with them. In this scenario, with this coach who's never, you know, been complained about before, you could confront him with this behavior and he might say, oh my God, I totally lost it. I'm really sorry. I promise it won't happen again. And you could, you know, document his file. That parent might, and then we always recommend that you go back to the person that reported and said, we heard you, we listened, here's what we did. Now, do you think that parent's gonna be satisfied? Maybe not. Maybe that parent might think that coach should never coach again, right? But you've addressed it in a way that's appropriate considering the, you know, the allegations, and you've let the parent know that you've addressed it. And like Maria said, there isn't like an appeal right to US Soccer. You guys are, you know, on the ground, you know the people involved, and our, you know, our governance structure doesn't provide for any sort of like second bite at the apple with us, as long as we can confirm that you actually took the report seriously and addressed it. You have the discretion to handle it the way that you want. But, you know, these situations are tricky because, like I said, you could have really healthy debates about what's okay and what's not, and it's hard sometimes to make the judgment, which is why it's always good. One really good solution is just, hey, someone told me that you said these things. I don't know if that happened or not, but just take another look at our policy. You know, here's what we allow and here's what we don't. If you said these things, it's not appropriate. If we get another report like this, we might have to consider, you know, more serious consequences.
Just think about that
No.
age group though, because at U17, what I'm telling you is they're harder on each other than the coaches
Yeah.
don't say anything.
Yeah.
So we get more complaints at that age group of so-and-so said this about my daughter, not
Yeah.
about the coach.
Well, that's another issue, but the age group involved is also a factor, right? Like what you might say to a 16-year-old, you know, maybe not profanity, but the way that you might speak to a 16-year-old is going to be different than the way you would talk to a 7-year-old. And so you're allowed to consider all of those things, and it's kind of like a totality of the circumstances situation, and we're here to commiserate with you because we know it's really hard. But honestly, like, if you don't ignore it, and you go back to the reporter and demonstrate that you followed up in the way that you think is best, it goes a long way, and maybe it doesn't go as far as it should. Like I said, you know, I would say half of the people that we engage with are parents who, you know, we just had the member did a full-on investigation with outside counsel, and we got the report because the parents not said, like, that wasn't enough, you know, and it's like, you know, it can be kind of a thankless job, but we all do our best. Does anybody else, I think, okay, we ran 15 minutes over, not great, but not the worst we've ever done. You're gonna get this presentation. Our participant safety hub has a lot of good information, including the model policies that we talked about. Renee Tolles does prevention education at US Soccer, but Maria and I are primarily on the response and resolution side. But you can always call us or email us anytime if we can help you. Or, you know, if you need advice about where to report something, you know, we're here for you. And we really appreciate everything y'all are doing to keep sports safe.
Yeah, will you be emailing this to people who have registered for tonight?
Yeah, we'll post this on our website, make it available to everybody.
What's that?
We'll make this available to the entire membership, to everybody.
You can email it now.
We'll post it, so people can go see it off the website, so it's available to everybody.
No, they won't email it.
Yeah, this says that we want the entire membership to have this information, right? So, because what I also want to reiterate a little bit is that what they're talking about with a lot of prohibited conduct policies, and they have sample policies on their website. You can use our policy just the same. Ours is taken right from theirs, right? There's no need to reinvent the wheel or change it up. As I said, you can add to it, make yours more restrictive if you'd like to. But the bottom line is you have a responsibility at your levels to handle these issues. We, this group right here, these two right here, we're here to help you guys get through these things and help figure it out. But it is your responsibility at the local level to deal with these concerns. So that's why we're saying you should have your own policies. A lot of people a lot of clubs tend to say, well, we'll just use the state's policy. We'll point to that, okay? You can, but you really should have your own that deal with your issues the way you are going to deal with them. And to make that available to your members, do whatever means, that this is how we deal with stuff at our club, and we take this seriously. So, so a lot of these scenarios that we talked about, really, they were local in nature of how you can first deal with them. Then the question of whether it's reportable, right? You can always report. All they're going to say is no jurisdiction, right? At the worst, and then it just comes back to you guys, and we assist. But what we also want to try to say is don't immediately pass the problem upwards because you have a responsibility and a duty of care to your members to handle these situations. Right? Otherwise, are we going to come into your club and start providing the discipline and making those decisions? It's not what we're really here for, but we're here to help you come to those decisions on your own. And I think one of the other things just to cover is, last year, the disciplinary matrix was created by U.S. Soccer, and we made that available to everybody. So that gives you basically standards from which you can make your decisions, right? And some of these offenses are in tiers. So what constitutes a tier 1, tier 2 offense, right? And I'll use one that's unfortunately all too common right now. There's a lot of racist language taking place on our fields, right? Can't necessarily prove that it didn't happen, but we're going to take the position that it did. Why are we not going to believe that player says this happened to them? But what's the way that we're going to deal with it? We have to, at the very least, listen, take their information, okay, and then we have to document it. There may not be an outcome, as these guys are talking about, whether it's safe sport or at our level. There may not be that answer that we can find that this happened. Because a lot of times you can't prove it. But we want to take the word of the person that's reporting it. We're going to then put that on file, right? We build that case history that, you know, player number 12 from such and such club now has 3 reports of racist language, right? Where there's smoke, there's fire. So that's something that the penalty starts to increase. So it goes from warnings to suspensions, and then it could go higher than that. But it all has to start with you guys at the local level. That's really the bottom line. And all the things that, yes, we're getting more protective, we're adding more policy to things. It's the world we live in, but it protects you guys as the leaders of the club. It protects the kids and the families even more. So, I don't know if there's any other thoughts or questions from that.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thanks to all you guys who came out tonight.